Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only daily television platform for small businesses. Over the past 7 years, we've understood what matters most to you, the entrepreneur. And in year 8, we're taking head on 2 of your most pressing concerns, that of funding and mentoring. I'm Sunanda Jayaseelan. On tonight's show, 2 influencer conversations. First up is with MissMalini. And on the other side of a break, Cars24 in focus. My first interview tonight is with an entrepreneur who's built her business ground up when it comes to the digital and social media space. I caught up with Malini Agarwal of MissMalini to understand how she's managed to create such a massive niche for herself in a space that's ever changing, what her advice is for other influencers about the power of brands, and also her advice for women entrepreneurs. Take a listen. Malini, such a pleasure having you here in studio with us. And you've had an exciting and explosive journey really over the past 10 years that you've had MissMalini.com. For those of our viewers perhaps who are not aware of what exactly it is you do, what all you do really, do you want to start there?
Wow, okay, so what we do is we're a media and entertainment network and studio, which is quite focused on positivity and catering to women. And now we do a lot of focus on OTT, like your Netflix and now the 23 different platforms. We have our own influencer network. We have our own in-house ad agency called Agent M Creative. We do a lot of, obviously, entertainment content, but we've branched out into fashion, beauty, lifestyle. I'm very, motivated to do things with women now, so we've created a community called Girl Tribe. Started the blog in 2008, literally as a hobby, because a friend suggested it. And it was like, there's a fun anecdote is because I was telling him how I write this gossip column and I never have enough space to write all the stories I want to. So he said, why don't you start a blog? And I said, what's a blog? And he said, it's like this digital diary and you can document the things you... And I was like, but who reads it? And he goes, don't worry. And he made me a WordPress account. And on May 6th, 2008, I wrote my first blog. Okay,
so things have obviously moved so much, right, over the past 10 years. And the biggest change perhaps that we can then talk about today for today's interview is how digital and social is being used by brands and companies. So let's start by how perhaps the digital market, and I have some figures that I want to read out, was suggesting that in India, 14% of a user's time is being spent on entertainment content. How perhaps can businesses and brands that are looking at this, how can they really use that data and that information?
What's interesting is that homes have now gone from like a single source to everyone having multiple, registrations, and they've decided that they're consuming content across various platforms. So now you're seeing the consumer making up their decisions and they're binge watching shows and they're really interested in getting quality content. And this has been with the advent of OTT, where it's no longer appointment viewing, and you're seeing a lot of change in that. So brands need to be immersive. Gone are the days where brands would sit, in their own space, on their own shelves, on their own platforms, and talk about themselves. Unless you're immersed into whether it's pop culture or where people are living, and people are living on social media. We check our phones 47 times a day. At minimum. Brands especially need to humanize themselves because people now want to engage with brands that feel human, that represent who they are, because they have so much choice now.
Okay, so when you're saying, humanize it and be more human, one or two things that you want to tell our viewers about how to build that social media presence for themselves from your experience?
I think the main thing is that, we've gotten so caught up in these words, your influencer marketing, your ROI, and we have forgotten the whole purpose. Social media, what was it meant, right, to be? It was meant to be an ability to amplify your possibilities to connect on a scale that's not otherwise humanly possible. I can have 5,000 friends on Facebook and connect with them at different times in different groups. I could never do that in real life. But we have actually dehumanized the audience. We've turned people into a follower count. We have to rehumanize them. We have to see the people and not the numbers, and brands need to be aware of that. Authenticity, conversation and engagement. It's a two-way platform. I always give this analogy, like you have to behave online the way you would in real life. Like in real life, you wouldn't go to someone's house, put up pictures of yourself and leave without talking to someone. But a lot of brands are guilty of doing that.
Okay.
They're only talking at an audience. They're not listening, they're not replying, they're not engaging.
Okay, so I was just going to ask you about, what perhaps then are the biggest mistakes brands are making online. One thing you're saying definitely is that you need to listen as well, not just talk. Anything else that you're seeing brands making?
I think it's also about understanding messaging. See, now brands are using influencers a lot because they've realized that it's no longer about, spray and pray, that I'm just going to put something on a billboard or have one, celebrity hold up a product. Yes, that gives you, reach and you become aware of the product. But now influencers have their own micro communities. They have a very strong presence in people's lives. The mistake a lot of brands make is that they have a particular messaging and then they expect that influencer to follow that format. And then the influencer no longer sounds authentic to their audience. You're going to an influencer because you know that they connect with someone. So allow them to mold your brand messaging, maybe make it a little more subtle, and that's really what's going to resonate. So I think that brands should trust the influencers who already know how to speak an audience. I think they should be willing to experiment, and you have to touch some kind of emotion, whether it's outrage or love or, feelings. That's what people will remember.
I want to read out some other data that we've managed to pick up. $1 trillion in terms of economic value from the digital economy by 2025. Where's that growth going to come from?
I think it's incredible because growth is coming from the fact that so many brands are actually taking their budgets for offline and terrestrial media and now putting them online because they're seeing not just the ROI, but they know exactly where their audience is coming from, what they do, what they eat, what they watch. It's kind of scary because it is like The Hack, it is, Black Mirror, but they're getting a lot more information about their audience. And just look at the number of people coming online. Tier 2, Tier 3, vernacular audiences, there are going to be 500 million people coming online. India has one of the youngest population. 70% are under the age of 35 and they're all online. They all have devices. They all have smartphones. So there is no other way. There's no other option. And it's great. It allows you to customize your content.
We started this interview by talking about your journey as an entrepreneur. I want to continue that, but talk about you as a woman entrepreneur, right? First up, what perhaps have been your biggest challenges and therefore your learnings from there?
So people ask me this question all the time, and I feel like the challenge may not necessarily have to be linked with being a woman. I think there are a lot of challenges for entrepreneurs in general. I learned everything along the way, right? I didn't go to business school. I was a backup dancer. I was creative, and I've always been that person. So one of my largest challenges was actually self-confidence, and I think a lot of women face that because we believe that how will we hold our own in a boardroom? We come with all this, overload of patriarchy and, self-confidence issues where we might. I remember sitting in a room at MTV and I had like streaked pink hair and I was sitting with 10 men in suits and I was sure that they're not taking me seriously, but they were. So that was on me to feel that way. But it just comes from just so many years of this conditioning. So I guess that was a bit of a challenge. I think the larger challenge I faced is that in 2008, there was no industry for blogging. So we were carving a niche for ourselves and a lot of people didn't understand what I was doing. People were not spending, brands were not spending online. Audiences were not sure how they felt about influencers doing branded content because it felt intrusive. And then we had to get people to understand that just like you might have an ad in a magazine, you might be doing something with a brand, but we're very, very open about the fact. Millennials want more than a paycheck. So you have to be much more aware. And I think that's why more women need to come into the industry, in all industries, is because we really do have a high EQ.
Sure. One thing that's definitely a problem though for women entrepreneurs, and data shows this, is that the funding that's coming into women-owned businesses is still in single digits. That hasn't changed. What's it going to take to change that?
I mean, I think it's not just in India, it's around the world. And it unfortunately comes from years of patriarchy, and that has to change. And I think women-owned businesses deserve a lot more attention. I think it comes from the fact that there aren't enough women VCs. There aren't enough women who are controlling those purse strings. And I don't think it's just the typical cliche of men necessarily saying, oh, are you going to take your career seriously? Are you going to go off and have a baby? I think a lot of people know that, but there are still a lot of these stresses. It will take time to change. I think it is on us to make that change. I think more women need to come into the workforce.
You though have raised funding. What was that experience like? What perhaps helped you?
It was tough. I'm not going to lie. I think that first when we raised it again, we were raising in an environment where this wasn't wasn't an industry, so I'm very grateful that the people who invested in us believed in it. They had a lot of foresight. We did our pre-Series A, and again, it came down to two things. One, people understanding the key man insurance issue, because my business is called MissMalini. So there's the worry that what happens if I get hit by a bus. Now, people don't go on getting hit by buses, but I do understand that. I think that I had to work really hard to explain that Malini Agarwal is the person, MissMalini is a brand. And that's why I created this anime that you see on my site, and she's going to age better than I will. She's my virtual avatar and represents a young audience. So I give the example of the Oprah network. So there's Oprah and there's Harpo. So MissMalini Entertainment is separate than Malini Agarwal, and I have consciously created social media handles and an identity that's different. So you have, whether it's an Ariana Huffington as my role models, and I'm trying to do that. So that was one challenge. Second, it is, I guess, very difficult to explain this as an industry because content is still something that people are not sure about. They don't see where they're going to get a huge exit. But I think they're slowly seeing how big a role content plays in the digital environment, and not just from revenue, because, you know, creating revenue through brands is not necessarily the easiest. It's a lot of legwork. There's a lot of heavy lifting. But now you're seeing in terms of content, like today, the hardest people to find are good fiction script writers. And that probably wasn't the case a while ago. Like literally, and I'm just going to put it out there, if there's any good writers out there, I'm
you know
hiring.
where to apply.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Malini.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to take a quick break on that note. Cars24 is our second influencer. That's on the other side of the short break. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight our second influencer is with Cars24. The market as far as automobiles are concerned and the buying and selling really of automobiles is changing, more so when it comes to the used market space. I spoke with Cars24 to understand really what they're doing when it comes to creating a USP for themselves in the used car market, what the way forward is looking like, and their advice for others in this space. Take a listen. Thanks so much for joining us here today, talking about Cars24 and really giving us the insights as far as the online used car market is concerned and why it is changing the way it is and why it's growing the way it is. But I first want to start by asking you to describe to us why perhaps you came up with the name Cars24. You know, what was sort of the branding reason behind that?
It's a very simple reason. When we wanted to get into this category, into cars, and especially pre-owned cars, we realized that a consumer buy or sell cars once in 4 years or once in 5 years. So it would be very hard for consumer to, you know, recall the name if he's not talking to us on a daily basis, right? So we wanted to keep the name very, very simple. And when we launched our website, we were one of the first one to launch an online pricing engine where any consumer can look at the price of the car at any point they wish to. So that's why we just combined both of it together, Cars24. So just keep it very simple, short and crisp, and easy to remember for the customers.
Okay, let's talk about the market. And this market has seen, sort of an interesting evolution, if I can call it that, when it comes to people and people's perception and mindsets really about buying and selling online. First and foremost, I want to understand in the 3.5 years that, Cars24 really has been in existence, what is that biggest change that you've seen which is leading to the kind of competition then that you're seeing in this market?
So we were the startup who actually started in a transaction-led model. Like earlier than us, there were a lot of other startups who were into auto category, and especially pre-owned car category, but they were all purely online classifieds where anyone can just look at the cars or exchange contact numbers and lease. But when we realized that the consumer pain points are even much more larger than that, because a consumer has to go on the ground and talk to so many strangers, negotiate, and have to check the service history of the car on his own, take care of all the paperwork. So it's a very tedious task, if you ask me to, right? And it takes maybe more than 30-45 days to complete the transaction from end to end. So we realized that even those startups are not solving the core issue what is out there in the market, right? And we knew that this is the value what we can add, right? If we get into the transaction-led model, if we get our hands dirty on ground and help consumer sell car, instantly, conveniently, at the same time provide a good value of the car.
Sure. Speaking of that opportunity then, I want to mention some other players who are in, a similar sort of space that you are in, which is Droom, Gaadi, etc., Carwali, etc. What is your model? If you can break that down for our viewers, and how perhaps it's different from what is existing in the market right now.
Okay, so I would say we are the pioneer in this model. We, unlike all other competitors, we actually buy and sell cars. While most of the players who have been out there before us, they don't actually buy and sell car on their own. They are just a platform where anyone can post their cars, whether they are buying or selling, and rest all the transaction happens on the ground between the customers who have actually interacted on their platform. But unlike us, when customer wants to transact with us, we have a physical branch which is out there spread across Pan India. At present, we have got more than 160 branches spread across more than 45 cities Pan India. So if a consumer wants to sell a car, he can visit at any of our branch. Our car jockey, we call car jockey to the person who is inspecting your car. We verify the condition of the car. Once the car condition is verified, we put up that car on auction. So what that auction does, that it derives the best possible value of the car, because all our buyers are spread across Pan India, right? A consumer, if he, without Cars24, is looking at the price of the car, he can only find the price of the car in the vicinity of his residential area, right?
Sure.
But we are able to find the best demand of the car spread across Pan India. So we get a pricing arbitrage over there, and consumer get a good value there.
Okay. Why is that model working for you? Why is this the model that you've gone with?
Because this is with the help of technology. Sure. We knew a consumer needs someone to solve their pain points of selling a car, right? At a fundamental level, to give an example, right? When you are buying a new car, you feel good about it, right? You are bringing some new car into family, you will ride on it for many years, and then you feel good about it. But consider the moment when you are selling the car. Suddenly you feel, oh, I need to make now a lot of efforts to sell a car. I need to, post the ad of the car on the website. I may have to speak to some mechanic. I may have to speak to some brokers. I may have to speak to my friends. Or you feel that there's a lot of work to be done to sell off your car, and it takes time. It takes energy to do it. And we realize that consumer doesn't want to go through that pain. He wants to just sell the car and move on.
Sure.
And there is no one-stop solution available right now in India who can actually, who can help consumer get the best value of the car, take care of the paperwork in a shorter time frame, everything done.
Sure.
Right? So that's why we call this model disruptive, because another validation of this is that's how we've been able to scale.
I want to talk about the funding that you've raised. Latest round of funding, Series D funding, I understand you've raised in excess of 52 million, but overall you've raised about 100 odd million. Are you seeing enough interest and understanding then, obviously coming into this market when it comes to investors, for someone who's watching this interview, who perhaps, a small business who's perhaps saying, could I also look at raising funds if I'm in this space? What's your advice?
I think absolutely. Auto category, like to give an example, right? In India right now, the car ownership per 1,000 consumers is almost only 35. So there are 35 car owners exist in, let's say, population of 1,000 people. If you look at the China, where the same ratio is 150 car owners in 1,000 people. In US, it's like 800 car owners in 1,000 people. So you can see we have a huge headroom to increase the car ownership in India. So when we look at the long-term picture, right, automobile industry in India is going to have long way to go, even to get saturated. So US market is saturated market where there is not much growth right now ongoing, but we have the difference between the car ownership per capita is huge right now with us, and I say anyone who wants to get into the auto industry would be a perfect time to start.
Let's very briefly talk about the fact that, and we started this interview talking about brand. One thing that you've done towards your brand as well has been to hire brand ambassador, very high visibility brand ambassador, Dhoni. How has that worked for you? What sort of advice would you have for someone who's perhaps looking at hiring, a brand ambassador for their business, about how that has really worked for you?
I think my advice to anyone who would want to get the brand ambassador would be that I would tell you my journey, right? What our journey has been, that we wanted to get a partner on board who has the same values and same traits like our brand is, right? Because then it becomes a natural partnership. Now, Captain Cool Dhoni, everybody looks up to him. He's, I would say, one of the most admired, more respected captain in the history of cricket. And the one thing which I personally appreciate about him a lot is that he's a problem solver, especially in the tough situation. He likes to help everyone, make right decisions. So those are the kind of values Cars24 also lives by day in, day out. So that became a natural partnership for us.
Okay. My last question then is what next for you? A lot of people are talking about, the entire explosion that we've seen in the country when it comes to, say, electric vehicles, etc. Is that perhaps something you're looking at in the next maybe 4 to 5 years? Anything in the pipeline you could talk about? So
I would say it's too early to talk about in the used car ecosystem about electric cars.
Okay.
To give you one perspective, right, in US, where the electric car ecosystem we perceive to be very mature, right, or 280 million cars on the road in US, less than 0.5% are electric cars. So there's a huge, even a developed market where electric cars have been on the roads for a very long time, but the share of the pie is still very small. And India, we have just begun our journey. It's good for us in the long run. I'm very happy that we have made a right step to launch electric vehicle policy in a manner that government is pushing for it. But I think as far as concerned about Cars24 getting ready for EMAs is still long way to go.
Okay.
But when the time comes, we'll be the first one to start.
Okay, and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time here on the show.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, completely out of time on the show. Our contact details up on your screens in just a moment. Do get in touch. We love hearing from you. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.